Hello, everyone, and welcome to DEI session number 4, Positioning Ourselves in Oppression. I'm Hannah Davis.
And I'm Claire Katzenson, and we're so happy for y'all to be with us today.
So,
Did you
so
want me to
happy. Uh,
thrill?
you've already heard about us probably at least 3 times now, so I'm not sure we need to give you all that much of an introduction, but we are passionate about DEI. We have education and background in it, and we are passionate about social services. So here we are to help the community in this way. Also, as a reminder, you have 2 different documents that you're going to want up during this session. One is that diversity, equity, inclusion working definition sheet that has our definitions, as well as the references and resources for each session. And then the second thing you're going to want pulled up is our activity packet for session 4. And any other things we need to talk about, Claire, before we get started?
Um, I guess the only thing would be like, as with all of the other trainings, we are going to be connecting, not just positioning ourselves. This training specifically is going to be a little bit more centered on you all as individuals, but it's with the goal to understand like the power that you have. Um, in multiple different identities that you may have, or and ways to connect that to the advocacy that you're able to have within the CASA role. So we're going to be bringing that up throughout. And I think that's kind of it. I just feel like I need to like give my background, but so happy that everybody's here. And I think we could just jump right in.
Yay!
So we're going to go straight into a land acknowledgement, which, as per all of the other iterations, please do not skip this time. We want to make sure that you are, hearing, feeling, understanding this concept. In case this is the first training that you are happening upon, a land acknowledgement is a very common practice when you are trying to pay respects to current and past tribes that have stewarded the lands that we are currently occupying and residing on right now. I'm going to be reading the 2 different tribes land acknowledgements for Medford, Oregon. If you are in a different location when you're watching this, please go to the blue linked site on this screen slide. There you go. On this slide to be able to find which specific tribes have stewarded the land that you are actually on right now, and then go and look up their land acknowledgements. Take some time to read it, and then um, if what's the word I'm trying to look for? Making sure that you are engaging in some way, whether that's like learning about the history or currently what's happening with these tribes, donating, engaging, looking into the land back movement, because we would not have this, like, we would not, land wouldn't be here and in this way if it wasn't for tribal nations, and also they should have access to a lot more. So please go down that rabbit hole. Let me see if there's anything. Oh, yes. And then it is very common for there to be multiple different tribal land acknowledgements. So you're not just going to be, sometimes it is just one, but most of the time it's going to be multi due to, different like migration, how folks were taking care of the land during different like times of year and all of that jazz. Also, another very interesting thing to go look up. But I'm going to be reading the land acknowledgements for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians and the Coquille Indian Tribe. So, starting off with the first one for the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians, is we want to respectfully acknowledge the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Tribe of Indians who have stewarded these lands since time immemorial. We want to further acknowledge the tribe's deep cultural and spiritual connection to these lands, in addition to its entire interest in ancestral areas, which include over 6 million acres located within the Rogue and Umpqua River watersheds. These lands and the vibrant resources within them have been important since time immemorial and will continue to be a vibrant part of tribe's cultural identity for generations to come. We recognize the pre-existing and continued sovereignty of the tribe and thank them for continuing to share their Indigenous knowledge and perspective on how I/we might work together to manage and care for these shared resources sustainably with mutually beneficial outcomes. We commit to engaging in a respectful, meaningful, and successful partnership as I/we explore shared stewardship of these lands. So the next one is the Coquille Indian Tribe land acknowledgement, and this is a more general one. It's the only land acknowledgement that they have at this point, but it is also recognizing other tribal nations. So just to know, to not like cause confusion, like why are they bringing up Confederated Tribes of Coos? It's a part of it. And I think that they're actually not as into the land acknowledgement thing if there's not relationships with them as the tribe as they are now. However, CASA does have those connections. So we really want to be respectful and take this time. So that being said, Indigenous tribes and bands have been with the lands that we inhabit today throughout Oregon and the Northwest since time immemorial and continue to be a vibrant part of Oregon today. We would like to express our respect to the First Peoples of this land, the 9 federally recognized tribes of Oregon. That is including Burns Paiute Tribe, Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Siuslaw Indians, Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla Indian Reservation, Confederated Tribes of the Warm Springs Reservation, Coquille Indian Tribe, Cow Creek Band of the Umpqua Tribe of Indians, and the Klamath Tribes. It is important that we recognize and honor the ongoing legal and spiritual relationships between the land, plants, animals, and people indigenous to this place we now call Oregon. The interconnectedness of the people, the land, and the natural environment cannot be overstated. The health of one is necessary for the health of all. We recognize the pre-existing and continued sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribes who have ties to this place and thank them for continuing to share their traditional ecological knowledge and perspective on how we might care for one another and the land so it can take care of us. We commit to engaging in a respectful and successful partnership as stewards of these lands. Thank you all for listening. And if we want to go to the next slide. Okay, as per usual, comfort zones. Okay, during these trainings, we really want to encourage folks to not just stay in our comfy, cozy spaces, but to push ourselves to challenge the ways that we think, especially those more firm values and kind of code of ethics that we go by. Not that they're wrong, but that the stronger they are, the more you can critique them. So on the right side here, you're going to see kind of different differentiations of the different zones. So you could take a minute to read that. This is just meant to be a visual aid. So for some people, the fear zone is not right after the comfort zone, or it might look different. This is just to kind of represent the idea that we are wanting folks to be in like an active learning zone, and that sometimes can bring up uncomfortability, but it's all for the idea of being in a growth zone, kind of being a sponge, taking things in, understanding it, really giving it the time of day, seeing the nuance in it, and not just kind of shutting down when it's something that might be contrary to what we previously thought or hold as a belief. So some things to ponder throughout our time today is what zone are you in right now? Where do you want to be during this time, during this training? How often do you kind of intentionally put yourself in each zone? Like, are you somebody who is in your comfort zone the minute that it's outside of it, the minute that you're having like a more heated discussion, it feels very, very uncomfortable? We just want you to kind of interact with that and interrogate that thought a little bit, or a lot. Understanding what's so comfy about the comfort zone, and are there things that you can kind of take with you to help bolster your receptiveness to learning and like positive fear and growth. And then, recognizing and remembering that there are times that we've all powered through the fear zone, and it has been able to most likely lead us to having a greater understanding of the world or people or ourselves. So yeah, food for thought. Next slide, Hannah.
Wonderful class. Okay, so we're going to be traveling into the unknown again today. So as a reminder from the other sessions, when you hear something that feels unfamiliar, uncomfortable, or piques your interest, write it down, and at the end of the session, choose one thing you wrote about to explore further. Jump down that rabbit hole, really go on an adventure, and try to learn something after this training as well as during.
Really go on an adventure, not just a low key one. Um, so, our agenda for the day is we're going to be recapping on some DEI and oppression, like terminology, and some of the things that we've learned so far in the training. We're going to do a social identity mapping exercise, critical thinking prompts, a day of stress example, and then we are going to close this session. So, if that sounds lickety split to you, join us as we go to the next slide. Drum roll. Here are definitions that are going to be, oh, did you want to? Yeah, okay, thank you. This is going to be on your terminology sheet. These are working definitions that we did create and are pulling from as our understanding for these trainings. And especially when we're talking about positioning ourselves in oppression today, we really want to highlight that oppression is the state of being subject to unjust treatment and or control, and that can be both in the mental, physical, and like spiritual ramifications of it all. So it's not just a one note hurtful comment. There is more weight behind it. Anything you want to draw attention to here, Hannah?
Well, I feel like at this point we've kind of explored these concepts a lot, and hopefully you're getting pretty comfortable with them. And if you're struggling, on the definitions or the differences between diversity, equity, and inclusion still, I'd recommend maybe going back to the first session and looking at it, or trying to find some resources online that help you kind of differentiate between all of them. Just remember that when we're talking about diversity, we're talking about who we're bringing to the table, and inclusion is the actual act of having people be included, having voices heard, and making an impact no matter who you are, kind of a thing. So, yeah, let's go to the next slide, to the beautiful visual Claire made.
So, I also, okay, so the last session that we did, Hannah brought up a really great point that the you in the center, also being able to like replace that with like your CASA kid or maybe their parents or their family of origin, who's currently having to engage in the system. So you is just, it should be I. But for now, it's just you. So that being said, this is just supposed to be like a rudimentary understanding that society encompasses all of these things. You know what I mean? We are a part of society, we are in it, we are surrounded and constantly interacting with the very colorful bubbles around us. It's by no means an exhaustive list and they can overlap. So, you know, some of them were strategically placed, like relationships being between religion and government and politics and laws. There are lots of things around that. But by no means to say that these are the only things. And kind of the idea when this was made was that these forms of oppression that we see on the outside in white bubbles are kind of piercing through these. How do I describe that? Like these different bubbles that we're interacting with on a daily basis, being the colorful ones. So, like homophobia is coming through in relationships and government politics. Like there is a long history of that. Or racism being in education and labor. You know what I mean? So these kind of concepts in that way. But we just wanted to be very clear in that like we're also talking about American society. It would be a little too nebulous of a training if we were to really be using case studies from like multiple other places. Not that it's not worthwhile, and there are a lot of similarities, but because we and where this training is taking place is in the United States of America right now, that is going to be the focus and the basis of this. Because different places have different laws and all that jazz. Let me see if there's anything else. Yeah, so this is just kind of calling back to the prior session where this was first brought up, and just as a way to be like on the same page about all of the different systems we are constantly interacting with on a daily basis. That being said, next slide.
Really quick
Sure.
too, just a thought, I think yesterday we focused a lot on how you experience that outer edge in relation to the more colorful, circle. So you can also think about it as like, how have you learned to perpetuate the things on the outside through your government, through your education, through your labor, through your economy. So that could be another fun lens to look at it. Not only how do you experience it, but how do you perpetuate it?
Exactly. Because we are not just bystanders in society and in forms of oppression. More often than not, we are partaking in this, or we have been, what's the word I'm looking for? It's not coddled. Like, it has been instilled in us in a very young age, and it is very normalized here in America. So like last time, these are all of these different terms are on your definition and terminology sheet. Go take a look if any of them are like, oh, what is that one again? Or, as a refresher. So we want to be really specific and the way that we are naming oppressions, because having the role of a CASA, you do have the ability for people to listen to you in a case, in a court system that obviously you can be doing so many different things to uplift kids and families as they're at now and to make sure that they are getting the needed services and life that they're entitled to. But a lot of that is pushing up against forms of oppression. Most of the families that are having open child welfare cases have had chronic poverty and are being subject to classism. That's not saying that they're not dealing with anything else. Another really big one that we see is ableism as well, is when we're trying to support kids and we're taking their behavior as too much and too out of left field, and like it's just the too much to manage thing, when really like maybe that child just needs these specific, like an IEP and a good like care team around them. So calling things out when you see it, like it's it can be uncomfortable. We will get to that in our next training. Is what did we call it? Interrupting oppression? Is that the name of it? So tune in for that because we have a lot of different like ways to interact with it, depending on your style or what the situation is. Um, that being said, all of these different oppressions are able to exist because of white supremacy. And in our last training, we talked about how colonization and specifically like the transatlantic slave trade that built this nation as it is now, created the formation of white supremacist ideology. And it would not be the incredibly complex structure it is without these forms of oppression bolstering it. So the visual we see on the right here with the umbrella is it's this overarching thing that are held up, but it's kind of under the oppressions that are allowing it to exist. So white supremacy, in short, white supremacy is allowed to exist because of oppressive systems. That is its tool. It is an intentional creation, and it has been many centuries. Is that 100 years? Many centuries in the making. So that being said, the bottom part is like just some information in case you weren't at the previous training, is that everyday things and concepts can be weaponized to reinforce systems of oppression. A lot of the things that we might think of as offhand comments or just what is quote unquote normal are rooted in these forms of harming and constricting people. There's some examples here that I think are really interesting to look into. There also are, it's the term intersectionality was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in '89 in one of her most notable essays, where it is talking about the layering and the connectedness of the specific connectedness and nuance that oppression that is not just one note, so it's not just racism, it's racism and misogyny, is able to, how that develops and how it looks differently than just solidified racism than just solidified misogyny. Um, because again, these are all intentionally created systems and things. And we have a lot of terminology, and I know it can feel like you are wading in a pool and you're just like, where on earth is everything? Or there's too much, or you're getting lost in the sauce. But words are able to help us make sense of what we're seeing. So, also, read her essay, great essay. Horrible the reasons why it had to exist, but glad that we have this term now. That being said, um, okay, I talked about that. And then all of these forms of oppression have offshoots. So that is also like, we didn't want to bog down even more in the definitions of it all, but you can get really, really specific with things. You know what I mean? Like maybe it's not just racism that someone is experiencing or your CASA kid is experiencing. Maybe they are experiencing colorism because they have more melanin than, let's say, the rest of their family. And so they're being treated differently from that. There are and those are words for us to be able to utilize to like further understand what someone is experiencing and going through. So look into that. It's not a great time, but it's an important time. Next one. Okay. And so where are we now? We see there is a spectrum that has been created where microaggressions are on one end, macroaggressions are on the other. All of it is harmful. All of it creates negative impacts. However, microaggressions are things that you can like walk away from or maybe don't have to confront. And macroaggressions are like intended harm. Again, none of it's okay. It is just a way to further understand like the differentiation between this. Um, and then we just have like negative impacts as a result. So we have an example here of like what happens when we're living in a misogynistic state, and what that creates is this solid identity for what men have to be. And the result of it is really critiquing and creating incredibly firm boundaries around how men and young boys have to interact. And we see the way that that trickles down and continues on throughout the rest of their life. So even though they're not the people who are being targeted by this form of oppression, they are also facing negative impacts. And one of the things about oppressive systems is that they negatively impact everyone because they create these incredibly firm constructions of like who we are based off of how the world sees us, and does not allow for freedom and flexibility. And is also just very not how humans interact at the end of the day. Um, and yeah, it just creates divisiveness across the board. Let me see if I get all those points. Yeah, and also like, just because you love someone or you know people in communities or you yourself are a part of communities, it doesn't give carte blanche that you could never see a problematic thing or never have an instance where you yourself are perpetrating harm. We want to be really clear that like when we do that, taking accountability is huge, not making yourself at the center of it, and also being able to like say something when you're seeing other people have to go through things or you're seeing other people being subject to things. Because sometimes it's easier to walk alongside somebody else and be there as a support for someone else than it might be for us to just like stand on our own for our own things. Hence why community is super duper important. And then, we are filming this in 2024 at the later end of it. And there are endless examples of the current oppressive systems and coined isms that we are seeing now. We are at quite an unprecedented time on repealing rights for self-determination. We are seeing higher voter suppression, freedom of speech dependent on who you are in the body that you are existing in, and who is protecting you, whether the police is protecting you or they are the people harming you. Lots of things, non-exhaustive list here, and not meant to be a doomy and gloomy situation. There is just bad shit happening, and to be able to reckon with that and hold space for it is super important, because that also lends itself to recognizing that change and progress is needed, and also identifying where your niche is in that. And you are here at CASA, so there is a niche, and let's go in more. Did you want to do this one, Hannah? I feel like you do this slide better.
Yes. Okay. So we are now going to kind of dive into positioning ourselves within the systems of oppression. And to do that, we're going to do an activity. But first, we're thinking of ourselves as this little tiny pinpoint in the universe and in all of the systems of oppression happening. And we need to narrow down and see what is our unique experience. So we were able to borrow this incredible tool from Sally Eck. Am I saying her last
Yes.
name right? From Sally Eck. And it is in your activity packet. It'll be the first page after the title page, so page number 2, called Social Identity Mapping. And you can read the instructions, but essentially you're going to be going through each one of the columns and figuring out which ones apply to you. So, for example, I am white and I can perpetuate racism onto people of color, or I can experience as a woman. Where's that one? Do, 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 do.
The
Oh,
cisgender one down.
thank you.
There we go.
Or as a cisgender person, you're going to be experiencing, or as a I cannot talk. As a cisgendered person, I can be perpetuating these things onto the targeted oppressed group, which would be transgender, genderqueer, non-binary, and gender non-conforming.
Mhm.
So it is a kind of fun thing to do. I actually really enjoyed the experience of going through it. It says, in order to better understand ourselves, it is important to build knowledge and expertise regarding our own experience with oppressive systems. This grid indicates the binary system with varying forms of oppression that all interact simultaneously. Most of us are both targets and agents of oppression, and we have the unique identity and sets of experiences indicated by our relationships to oppression. Knowing who we are and having language to talk about it, to build confidence and help create understanding and empathy for ourselves and others. So you may be looking at something and realize that you are both an agent and a targeted group, or maybe you are only on the targeted side, or maybe you're only on the agent side. So you're kind of going through and you're highlighting the things that exist for you. What I should have done is probably scanned in my example to show what mine ended up looking like, but I think you all can handle it. I would choose, if I was you, to use maybe a highlighter, because that's what we used in class with Sally Eck and it worked really well. Claire, any other things to say about this before we have them jump onto it?
Yeah, I think that there's kind of 2 points. One, I think it's really interesting to also, when we're doing this for ourselves, to really understand also what has changed in our life. You know what I mean? Like maybe at one point you were cisgender and now you're transgender, and you could perceivably tell the difference in your treatment by the world through that. Or there's a variety of other things here. Like let's say that you originally immigrated here and you didn't have documentation at first, and then after an entire journey you now have citizenship here, and the the resulting change in, like the fear, the worry, all of those different things, the safety. um the other thing that I want to say is that sometimes it can be very interesting, and in this example where people are like, well, people view me this way but I am not this way. So an example of that is myself. I use they them pronouns, so that actually makes me a part of the gender queer, non-binary, transgender community. But because I'm at a point right now where I'm growing my hair out, everybody perceives me as a woman. So it would be incorrect for me to just only choose one, because yes, I'm having this very particular non-binary experience, but also I'm walking in the world and being seen in a very particular light. Which that is not like a diminishment on your identity, but a understanding of how we are being viewed. So also like keeping that in mind, you know what I mean? You might be circling both and you're like, well, this is where how I identify, and then this is how the world sees me. And that is also okay. This is meant to just be a way to extrapolate some key things about our identity in order to kind of interrogate a little bit more. That's all I have on my hand, Anna. Well, actually, the other part would be please take some time, pause the video to be able to fill this out. Feel free to like write some notes down about maybe how this is like feeling, or, you know, if you're finding yourself completely on the privileged end of the group. Maybe questioning like, do I engage in these communities? Do I know people in them and not just like a single tokenized friend who's made to represent an entire community, but like, have I put myself in the position to be someone who has a diverse body of people who I am in community with and relating to, and not just maybe by like force of working with people. So take some time, pause here, enjoy, and then come back when you're ready.
Wonderful, Claire. Thank you. I will go back to the slide and give you a moment to get to that pause button, like Claire said. And when you're ready, we'll be here. Okay, so now that you've done your social identity mapping, you're going to go into the activity packet on the next page and do your reflective thinking exercise. This is usually how we start off the trainings, but we wanted you to start with that identity mapping and then reflect from there. So what are the different types of oppression, um, or what different types of oppression have you experienced over your life? And how has that experience changed over your life? For example, I have been perceived as both healthy and not healthy. I have been perceived as both not having any mental health illnesses, and I've also experienced anxiety and depression personally. At one point in my life, I would have, identified as heterosexual or straight, and now I do not identify that way. I identify under that queer umbrella. And so, how has your experience changed throughout your time? And which has been the hardest to deal with? What's made any of the changes easier for you to bear, if at all? And then when you're done with your reflection, please come back to us and we're going to send you for more reflection, but we want to talk to you before that happens. Give you a second to pause.
Do you want to do the full version, Hannah? Oh, there we go.
Okay, so now that you're done with your reflective writing exercise, we're going to talk about some critical thinking prompts. So in your activity packet, we have these prompts, and they are just some things to explore and think about and start thinking about maybe why they might be problematic. So why might it be problematic, or why might people say, I can't believe people are still racist? Or I don't understand how this is still happening in 2024.
Or insert whatever year you're watching this training in.
Yes, it's 2025, maybe even later than that. I can't believe marginalized communities are still being oppressed, or I do not keep up with current events because it's not good for my mental health. So just think through for a moment why those things may or may not be problematic statements, what comes up for you when you hear them. And then Claire and I are going to kind of do a brief discussion about them to kind of talk about why we were bringing this up in a moment.
Mm-hmm.
Insert time for you to reach the pause button. Okay, welcome back. So this was kind of well, that's what it's going to look like now. This was kind of what we thought is a fun way to interact and reflect on some really commonly made statements including, I think, often right now, we hear a lot of, I do not keep up with current events because it's just not good for my mental health. I can't keep up with everything going on. And then also, really, that top one, too, the I can't believe is often used. And, in some of your prompts that you had were included, why do you think people cannot believe that oppression is still happening today outside of all of the awfulness that occurs in the world? Why does that seem like something that is still happening? So the reason that we think that these statements can be problematic is because it really discredits the experience of people that have been for so many centuries experiencing racism, experiencing oppression, being part of marginalized communities that are continued to be that are continued being harmed, and that really hasn't gone away. I think that we were kind of raised in a society or in an educational system that really taught us that this has gone away. This is a thing of the past. We watch videos of what used to happen, and we never talk about it as much, or at least I know that some of my experiences growing up were that we didn't talk about it as much as in the present. And so that's really devaluizing. I have words today. The
Devaluing.
Yes, there we go. Devaluing the experience that people have.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else I would add. You were like really covered all the bases. I think, oh, the other part I would also say is like really highlighting the fact that like the people who are at the forefront of experiencing systemic oppression are people who cannot tap out of being in the know about what's happening. There's a way that that is compromising their safety. And when you are in a position of privilege to be able to say that it's stressing you out, when it's some, and I also want to be very clear, there have been times that I have said this. There are times that like we, this is not saying you're on the verge of a mental health crisis or you are deep in it and you need to be engaging with what is happening in a global like politics perspective. I would say just like being very understanding and knowing the reasons why you feel like you can tap out, why you need to, because if something isn't affecting you, it's easier to step in and do something than when you're living, breathing the like harm and oppression that you're contending with. That is why allyship is so important. We will get to that in our next training. But yes, this isn't supposed to be saying like a judgment statement. This is more like be critical of yourself, be understanding of others, like when you hear these statements. But also like there is a privilege in being able to tap out. And especially if it's not going to be impacting you. Anyway, I think I'm repeating, so I'll hand it back to you.
As Claire said, it's really important to remember that we do need to tap out once in a while. And some people can't. Some people, even when they need to, they can't because they are, one of the main groups of people being hurt. And so it's a hard time for them to be able to just say, I live in Palestine, but it's really hard to watch my friends die today. So I'm just going to tap out of this experience and not be engaged in continuing social media and trying to get people to recognize the struggle that's happening here. Not to say that they don't also probably go through moments of hopelessness where they are trying to disassociate and get out of where they're at. The risks are just much higher for them. So it's important to think about, who is trying to cause the harm and what benefits are they trying to reap from whatever harm they're causing. And going back up to the I can't believe this is happening, the other thing that's important about that is that disbelief doesn't offer solutions or validation. It doesn't offer understanding or empathy. It's really a way to distance ourselves from the issue. And I think we all go through that at first when there is something that happens that is really triggering. You know, a lot of us go to a place of disbelief, and there's a time and there's a space for that. But then you have to be able to move out of that disbelief and into belief, where we can validate the experience of the people that are sharing this with us, where we can start to understand, where we can access the attributes it takes to be empathetic and to be compassionate. And when you believe, you open the door to solutions and you shine a light on the issues that are allowing, that are allowing you shine the light on the issues and allow it to not hide anymore. You make it so it's visible. And you're saying, no, I will believe you. I will believe that right now more women are dying all over America from the abortion bans that have happened. Whether I believe in abortion or not, I will believe that women are dying in their cars, that women are dying in their homes, that they're not getting the proper care that they need when they have a miscarriage because doctors are afraid to operate on them. So if I say, I can't believe this is happening and I don't move through that belief, I can't then offer that validation and I can't start to see solutions because I'm in a state of not even believing it's real. So we
Mhm.
have to move past that and say, I believe you, I validate you, I understand, here's my empathy, here's my compassion, and what are we going to be doing? How are we going to mobilize and help fight against whatever oppression is occurring? What do you think?
Absolutely. And I think that my only other point on that would be, which also amazing example, Hannah, is the way that disbelief just lends itself to someone having to comfort us and ourselves. And if we are the person who is the privileged party in that case, it is putting a disproportionate amount of weight and labor on another person. Again, being able to identify those people for yourself, because it's not saying don't talk about this, be a locked box, repress your emotions. That's not what we're trying to state by any means. Being really clear with the fact of like, when you're in situations, if you're talking to someone who's having to contend with it, supporting them, expressing belief and action and empathy on behalf of them and just human rights, frankly. Um, yeah,
And
yeah,
lean into the idea that there is nuance and there's nothing that is black and white. Don't go, as we talked about yesterday, and looking at the characteristics of white supremacy, that either or thinking. You don't have to exist in the either or, where either this issue is bad or it's good. You can exist in the gray. You can talk about the nuance. You can talk about the harm and the good, or maybe only the harm.
mhm,
Because a lot of this, there is no harm, and the good is, again, only good for certain people that want to have a specific agenda, and it only serves them. So just think of
right.
the nuance.
And something that Hannah and I say a lot, and especially when we were creating this, is that two things can be true. Like more than two things can be true. Um, like different people's experiences with things. But being able to hold that nuance in gray space is super duper important. That being said, Hannah, I think this is you, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, absolutely, Tara. That was great. Okay, so now we're going to go from our critical thinking prompts and we are going to um, take a step. So we remember we were zoomed in, we were the one planet or the one star in our little solar system. And now we're going to step away from ourselves and go into our community and start thinking about the ways that oppression is occurring in our community. So Claire is going to
Yes.
walk us through a day of stress example.
Oh, could you click three more times? I didn't realize that the little clouds were on a specific thing.
Well, that's
Okay,
when I was like
so
that. I did it.
yes, fab. So we are going to be doing a little exercise called a day of stress. However, for this, we do need to create a baseline. So in the box here is the description. We're going to be using a case study of a parent who we have seen numerous examples of a person exactly like this within CASA work. So I'm just going to read it out really quick and then give a little bit more description to what we're going to be doing. So we are going to be using we are going to be using the example of a 25-year-old mother who has an open ODHS case. Within the last 6 months, she left a relationship that had domestic violence in it with the father of one of her children. That is meant to be a comma, not an apostrophe. Notes for later. She's white, neurodivergent, struggles with substance use and generational poverty. Meanwhile, she's trying her best to engage in her case and services to get her children back, who have been removed from her for close to a year now, which, if we're thinking of APSA timeline, that is putting it at a particular point in the case. She is currently adjusting to living alone after being in detox and residential treatment for her substance use. She is pursuing getting a license so she can have a car, but has been taking the bus and getting rides when able to. So we want to be thinking of this person as like a full-fledged person. Where would their baseline stress level be? Like on a normal day, you wake up, everything else is going fine and swimmingly. What level of stress are you going to be at if you have an open case? You don't have a mode of transportation that's reliable or has the ease of your own personal vehicle. You're struggling and working through your own recovery journey. You just ended a relationship. You are reckoning with the trauma after effects of domestic violence. You this is a little vague, the generational poverty, but it's kind of illustrating the point of like not having the financial resources to be able to, take a break or have people buy things for you or have yourself buy things for you with ease. All of these different things. And then so when we're thinking of what would that baseline be, like let's say you come up with like a number and you're like, that is like a 10 out of 100 scale, or it's at a 50 out of 100, like you're already there. We just want to be you putting empathy to work within this example. And Hannah, would you be able to go to the graph at this point? Because I want to use the graph and then show this example.
Okay, so go to the graph in their activity packet first.
Yeah, so in your activity packet, we have a pre-made one. Sorry, I couldn't do it the other way, but we want it, it needed to be longer, but keeping in mind, so just rotate it if you're able to. Amazing. So for this one, it does just have like a numeric, like 0 to 15. You can absolutely cross that out. And if you're like baseline is 50 for this person, you can absolutely put that in. And then along the horizontal axis at the bottom, it says different times of day. So it goes from 6 a.m. until 9 p.m. And what we are going to be doing is putting kind of pinpoints on this. So think like math class, you're putting a point on a graph to represent where the stress level is along the vertical axis and what time of day it is. So we're going to have different scenarios that happens within this person's day that you're going to plot that point and then have like a little line graph to be able to see the tumultuous experience that can be an average day and we're using the example of a parent for this, to be able to also understand that we are usually interacting with original caregivers at some of the worst days of their life, at some of the worst times that they are having to contend with, the most judgment that they are being subjected to, and what that actually feels like, and what happens before they get to the courthouse and what happens after they leave. Would you go to the example of the graph that we've done in the past? So this is one that we did together, I think one of our first sessions. And as you can see, so I had I put in numbers on the side, so on that vertical axis, and very quickly people identified that like baseline is 10, you know what I mean? Like parent is not doing well. And so you even see like at the peak of the day, which is at court kind of around 8 a.m.-ish, like it is above the graph, you know what I mean? So we want to be able to, and then there's plot points, and then we just drew a line to connect it and kind of give this visual representation of it. So we are going to go to the next slide, Hannah. And these are the specific, click again. You might have to click a little bit. Oh, they all showed up at, How delicious was that? Oh my goodness. Okay, so I tried to make this as like a little bit of a timeline here. So we're going from 6 a.m. until 6 p.m. That was just for frankly spacing on this slide. You can space it out a little bit more on yours, but we want to be going from left to right, and top to bottom for each of these. So starting with that this parent woke up late due to their phone dying last night. And then they weren't able to get a bus pass from ODHS, so they had to walk a mile and a half to court. And then because they're walking, they went past a street that they used to buy and use substances on. Then they're at court. They're having a trespassing warrant brought up in court, which is also a different level. Like you're not just at court talking about trying to get your kids back and all the things that you're doing to do that. Now we're bringing up a warrant, which is another additional layer of worry and stress and actions that you have to take to rectify that, especially with child welfare, to be able to prove that you are like a competent caregiver and on top of your own things so that you could be on top of and a safe person for your kids. Um, because they were at court, they saw their previous partner outside of the courthouse. And as we said before, there was prior domestic violence in that relationship. When they're leaving the courthouse, they were followed by the police for a block because there are a lot of police officers around there. Followed by, they're just like, I need a reprieve, calls a friend, goes through a little motivational chat. Chat's done, a little bit of levity from that, didn't have money for lunch. So now, it doesn't even say that this person ate breakfast. Maybe they haven't eaten the entire day. Maybe all they were able to get was like a sip from the water fountain or like a Red Bull on their way out the door. Um, but they were like, let's take a minute to ground and deep breathe. And during that time, mom was notified that her bus pass is ready to be picked up at ODHS. So that is a little bit of a boost there. And then she kind of closes out her day with being able to text her sponsor about how it went because this was a very stressful court hearing. And maybe this is the first time mom was going alone and not having so many supportive people in there, trying to really demonstrate like her autonomy within doing this because that's something that is really wanted to be seen by the court and child welfare a lot of the time. Not saying that like people who are supportive, it's not ideal for them to be there, but they place a lot of importance on doing things yourself. And then she had the wherewithal the day before to be able to pre-make some dinner. So that's kind of the only meal that she's eating later in the day. So we just want you to pause this, use this day of stress example and these specific times of day to be able to plot some points on those graphs, draw that line graph, and look at it and contend with the fact that this is an incredibly stressful day for a human being to go through. What is something for a CASA to attend and have on their calendar and schedule to show up and advocate for someone and can be a very empowering experience, can be a absolutely atrocious day for somebody else. So we really just wanted to be able to understand someone else's perspective, even within this system, who a lot of the times CASAs are working alongside with. That being said, Hannah, any thoughts? Any things you'd like to add?
So beautiful, Claire. You did such a great job walking them through the activity. And I just want to say, while you're reading these, also be thinking about why some of these things are on here and how we're trying to connect it to oppression. So, for example, not having a car or the ability to drive to court, so you need to rely on the bus, but you also need bus passes because maybe, like Claire had said in the example, this family has, multiple generations of living and experiencing poverty. And so that is part of classism, right? They are experiencing this, and that is a huge struggle into even just showing up to court one day. That another way that struggle might be happening is that they didn't eat. And some of the other things, maybe they've learned to take deep breathing and grounding just because they have a stressful life, or maybe that's one of the things they do because they experience depression and anxiety. And so we have another layer of ableism that could be happening in their life. followed by the police officer for a block. We had a really good discussion about this in class where some people felt like that would be, something that was a stress relief because they just saw their DV partner and now they know that there's a police officer behind them and maybe they feel safe because there's somebody that could protect them from that DV partner. Or maybe they see the police officer and now they're feeling, triggered and worried because they do have that trespassing warrant or because they are a person that is from a community that's often targeted by the police. And so it's really just thinking through the process on each one of these and how it could be interacting with oppression.
Absolutely. And I think that that blends beautifully into the next slide, Hannah, where it's talking about the pillars of white supremacy is really being able to identify the the standards. Oh, do you want to flip to the next one?
Are we
Um,
give the moment to pause and go?
oh, yes, yes. So sorry. Please take a moment to pause, then I'll start rambling.
Make it to the pause button. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Just
Okay, so then picking up again, 14 Pillars of White Supremacy. This is drawing back to the naming oppression slide that the white supremacy being this umbrella and systems of oppression being the ones that hold it up. These are pillars that are like the tangible things we are being constrained to in our day to day life and the standards for how to be like the best active participant in society and in life. That isn't, how do I say this? Like, we are all being held to and is incredibly harmful. Take a look at these. In the prior training, we had folks go over and identify the ones that like they are struggling with the most, or maybe being like, I really had to contend with at this point in my like at a certain point in my life, the either or thinking. Like that was just too much of a binary perspective, and I had to let nuance reign and delve into gray areas in order to like not have to be constantly combating against good or bad in not that to say that there's not good or bad. Please hear me with your heart with this, but in the way of always having to be right, or that if one thing is right, the other thing is wrong, that multiple things cannot be existing at one time. So we really wanted to bring this back up to also understand like what are the standards that we ourselves are perpetuating within working with the court system and child welfare. Like, there are a lot of these that are very much desired for original caregivers and parents or family of origin to get their children back, or are good signs within these systems that is really really difficult, especially if this isn't like, I'm not saying that this is also a practice, you know what I mean, like when people aren't doing this, they are being penalized. So when we're thinking about perfectionism of parenting, when we go to a grocery store and we see a kid being dysregulated, there is so much opinion, there's so many opinions on how the people who are caring for that child should be responding or should not be. And the difficulty with that is that it is then passing judgment and like a moral code on is this person good or not? You know what I mean? Then we're not even just like, is this child being supported in this situation? And like, what can we do to support this kid? It is then making a sense of urgency. And like sometimes I remember, oh, I think that was a part of our training before. There was this one situation, which is not a novel situation. This was not a one and done thing, is that there was a family at a park, and one of the kids was kind of like teeter-tottering away and walking kind of outside of the designated play area, and a community member, instead of going up to the kid and trying to find the person that they were with, they called the police. And because of that, and because of mom's prior history with police force, her children were taken away, and she's then contending with so much money in fees and legal fees, and um, had to stop school and wasn't allowed to work, and because she was having to do so many things in order to get her children back, that she wasn't able to keep the job that she was having, and completely dismantled this entire family's life. So really just being able to highlight the fact that, like, yes, maybe on paper, a sense of urgency sounds good, but a sense of urgency around things that are not emergency situations can perpetuate stress. And so I don't want to go through like every single one of these, but really just being able to highlight the strain and parameters that this places on people and us as like a community when we're all enacting this and we're all regurgitating what we've been taught as the right way to be, instead of critiquing this and also unpacking it for ourselves. Like, is this important to me? Why is it important? Is it important because someone taught it to me? Is it because my employer wants it? Or is this a value for me? That being said, thoughts?
Beautifully done. I think that was perfect, Claire.
Okay.
Okay,
Um,
so you're going to go to the last page of your activity packet, and your reflective thinking exercises as we close out the session are: what are some topics of conversations you want to have, events you want to attend, films you want to see, or books you want to read? And what are your next steps to get going out and doing it? So you can pause, or you can just stick around to say goodbye. So
and
thank you so much
if
for,
you're, oh, you go, sorry.
you go, Claire.
I was saying, if you're sticking around, thank you so much for attending this training. Much appreciation to you all for taking time out of your day to be here with us. Always, as always, we have the survey for you all to complete for this specific training or any of the other ones that you've taken. Please let us know your thoughts. We love a critical reflection moment. Please give us if there's any tips or things that you'd like, or anything that could be kind of improved upon, please let us know. Don't hesitate on that front. And I could do the full closeout. Do you want me to just do the final one bit, Hannah? Okay, well, we hope that you have a fabulous rest of your day, whatever time of day you're watching this in. Take care of yourself, pat yourself on your back, have a chat with someone, call someone up, turn to someone in the next room, be like, oh my gosh, I just was learning all this stuff and I wrote all these things, and share what you're learning and the things that you're thinking about from these trainings. That being said, hope you all are doing well, taking care, and till next time. See you later.
See you in the next session. Bye.